The moment my 7-year-old daughter Hazel stood in that pediatric ward, clutching her worn teddy bear and staring directly at Dr. Brown, I knew our family would never be the same. Her small voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk, and in that instant, every adult in the room stopped breathing. The fluorescent lights hummed above us, casting harsh shadows on faces that would haunt me forever. My name is Nadine Porter. I'm 32 years old, mother of 2, and until that horrific night in February, I believed my husband Grant and his mother Beatrice were on my side. I thought the little tensions in our home were normal family friction. I thought my concerns about my baby's health were just new mother worries. I thought when my husband called me anxious and overprotective, he was trying to calm me down out of love. I was wrong about everything. This is the story of how my baby's 104-degree fever exposed a betrayal so deep it shattered everything I thought I knew about the people I loved most. It's about how a grandmother's twisted love became poison, how a father's blind loyalty became neglect, and how a 7-year-old girl's courage saved her baby brother's life when every adult around her failed him. But let me introduce you to the people who shaped this nightmare, because you need to understand who they were to comprehend the magnitude of what they did. My husband, Grant Porter, 34, worked as an investment banker at a prestigious Minneapolis firm. He had this way of making you feel small when you disagreed with him, always armed with logic and that condescending half-smile that suggested you just didn't understand the bigger picture. Women found him charming. His colleagues called him brilliant. His mother called him perfect, and that should have been my first warning. Beatrice Porter, 68, had raised 3 successful children and never let anyone forget it. She moved in with us 6 weeks before that terrible night, supposedly recovering from hip surgery. But looking back, I wonder if the surgery was just an excuse to infiltrate our lives. She had this way of delivering criticism wrapped in concern, like a razor blade hidden in cotton candy. "Oh, Nadine, dear, I'm only trying to help," she'd say after undermining every parenting decision I made. Then there was my daughter, Hazel, 7 years old with eyes like an old soul. She noticed everything but had learned to stay quiet when Grandma visited. Hazel had this teddy bear named Dr. Brown, a gift from my late father who'd been a pediatrician at Minneapolis Children's Hospital for 30 years. Dad died when Hazel was 4, but she carried that bear everywhere, like she was carrying a piece of him with her. Sometimes I'd catch her whispering to it, and I'd wonder what secrets she was sharing with the grandfather she barely remembered. And Felix, my baby boy, just 8 months old with a smile that could light up the darkest room. He had Grant's dark hair but my father's gentle eyes. Felix had been born during a snowstorm 2 weeks early, fighting his way into the world like he knew he'd need to be a fighter. The nurses called him their little warrior. I just called him my miracle, because after 2 miscarriages, holding him felt like holding answered prayers. Our house in the suburbs should have been a haven. 4 bedrooms, a big backyard with a swing set Hazel loved, a kitchen where I baked cookies on Sundays while Felix babbled from his high chair. But Beatrice's presence had turned it into a battlefield where every parenting choice became a war. She'd reorganize my pantry, explaining that her system was more efficient. She'd refold the baby's clothes, noting that her way prevented wrinkles. She'd hover while I prepared Felix's bottles, sighing dramatically at the formula I used. "Breast is best," she'd say, knowing full well I'd struggled with milk production and carried enormous guilt about it. Grant would just nod along, adding, "Mom's got a point, Nadine." The morning everything changed started like any other battle in our ongoing war. Felix had been fussy all night, and I knew something was wrong. Call it mother's intuition or paranoia, but I felt it in my bones. When I took his temperature and saw 101, I reached for the infant Tylenol our pediatrician had prescribed for teething pain and fever. That's when Beatrice appeared in the nursery doorway like a specter, her face twisted in disapproval. Grant stood behind her, already dressed for work, checking his phone while his mother prepared to launch another attack on my competence. Neither of them could see what I saw in Felix's eyes that morning. Neither of them recognized the storm that was coming. But Hazel did. She stood in the hallway clutching Dr. Brown, watching everything unfold with those knowing eyes. If only I'd known then what she was carrying, what terrible secret Beatrice had forced her to keep. Maybe I could have prevented what came next. Life in our Minneapolis suburb had once felt like living inside a Christmas card. Tree-lined streets, neighbors who waved from their driveways, the sound of children playing until streetlights came on. Our two-story colonial with its blue shutters and wraparound porch had been our dream home when Grant and I bought it 5 years ago. Now, with Beatrice installed in our guest room like an occupying force, it felt more like a prison where I was constantly on trial. The morning routine had become a careful dance of avoidance. I'd wake at 5:30 to have an hour of peace with Felix before the household stirred. Those quiet moments, feeding him his bottle while the sunrise painted the kitchen gold, were the only times I felt like myself anymore. Felix would grab my finger with his tiny hand, his eyes locked on mine with complete trust, and I'd whisper promises that I'd protect him from everything harmful in this world. I never imagined the harm would come from inside our own home. By 7, Beatrice would descend the stairs, her silk robe flowing behind her like a queen entering court. "Oh, you're using that brand of formula again," she'd observe, her tone suggesting I was feeding Felix poison. "Grant thrived on goat's milk when he was a baby. Much more natural." "The pediatrician recommended this formula," I'd respond, keeping my voice level, though my jaw would clench so tight it ached. "Doctors today just push whatever the pharmaceutical companies tell them to," Beatrice would reply, settling into what had become her chair at our kitchen table. "They've lost touch with traditional wisdom." Grant would appear next, already checking emails on his phone, his attention divided before the day even began. He'd kiss my cheek absently, ruffle Hazel's hair as she ate her cereal, and grab the coffee I'd prepared exactly how he liked it. 2 sugars, splash of cream. He never said thank you anymore. Beatrice had been there 6 weeks, and in that time, Grant had transformed from my partner into his mother's son, defending her every comment, validating her every criticism. "Mom makes a good point about the formula," he'd say, not looking up from his screen. "Maybe we should research alternatives." "Our pediatrician has 30 years of experience," I'd remind him. "So does my mother," he'd counter, and that would end the discussion. Hazel had developed a strategy of silent observation. She'd eat her breakfast quickly, then disappear to her room to get ready for school. I'd find her there talking quietly to Dr. Brown, the teddy bear's worn fur testament to years of love. Sometimes she'd stop talking when I entered, and a flicker of something would cross her face. Fear? Guilt? I should have paid more attention to those moments. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" I'd ask, sitting on her bed to braid her hair. "Yes, Mommy," she'd answer, but her fingers would tighten on Dr. Brown. The battles with Beatrice extended to every aspect of childcare. She'd installed herself as an authority on everything from sleep schedules to feeding times. "Babies need to learn to self-soothe," she'd declare when Felix cried. "You're creating bad habits by responding to every little whimper." "He's 8 months old," I'd argue. "He cries when he needs something." "You're making him soft," Grant would chime in, parroting his mother. "Mom raised 3 kids successfully." What I wanted to scream was that one of those successful kids was now a man who couldn't form an opinion without his mother's approval. But I'd bite my tongue, pick up my crying baby, and feel Beatrice's disapproving stare burning into my back. The house itself bore evidence of Beatrice's invasion. My carefully organized kitchen had been rearranged according to her preferences. The nursery, which I decorated with soft yellows and greens, now featured items she'd purchased: crystals for positive energy, essential oil diffusers for natural wellness, and books about alternative medicine stacked on the changing table. Each edition felt like another erasure of my presence in my own home. "These oils are much better than those chemical medications," she'd told me one afternoon, arranging amber bottles on Felix's dresser. "Lavender for sleep, eucalyptus for congestion, tea tree for infections." "Felix's doctor hasn't approved any of these," I'd protested. "Doctors don't know everything," she'd replied with that superior smile. "Mothers have been healing babies for thousands of years without their approval." Grant had walked in during that conversation, and instead of supporting me, he'd said, "Mom's oils can't hurt Nadine. Why are you so resistant to everything she suggests?" That was the question that hung over our household like a storm cloud. Why was I so difficult? Why couldn't I appreciate Beatrice's help? Why was I so anxious, so controlling, so unwilling to accept wisdom from someone with more experience? Looking back now, I realize I wasn't anxious. I was terrified. Some primal part of me recognized the danger before my conscious mind could name it. That afternoon, Felix's temperature climbed steadily despite the morning dose of Tylenol I'd managed to give him. By 1 o'clock, the thermometer read 102.3, and his usual cheerful babbling had been replaced by a weak, persistent whimper that made my chest tight with worry. His cheeks were flushed crimson, and when I picked him up, his small body radiated heat through his onesie. "Beatrice, I'm calling the pediatrician," I announced, reaching for my phone while bouncing Felix gently against my shoulder. She looked up from her crossword puzzle, those calculating eyes studying me over her reading glasses. "For a little fever?" "Honestly, Nadine, you'll have them thinking you're one of those hysterical mothers who calls about every sniffle." I dialed anyway, my hands trembling slightly as Felix's whimpers grew louder. The nurse who answered was patient but routine. "Continue with the Tylenol as prescribed, alternate with lukewarm baths, and monitor his temperature. If it goes above 104 or he shows signs of distress, bring him to the emergency room." After hanging up, I gave Felix another dose of medicine, watching carefully as he swallowed. Beatrice stood in the doorway, her disapproval radiating like heat from a furnace. "All those chemicals in his little system? No wonder he's sick. His body is trying to detoxify." "The medicine is helping him," I said firmly, checking the clock. "I need to pick up Hazel from school in 20 minutes. "Leave Felix with me," Beatrice offered, her voice suddenly honey-sweet. "You look exhausted, dear. A grandmother's touch might be exactly what he needs." I hesitated, every instinct screaming no, but Felix had started to settle slightly, and the school was only 10 minutes away. 20 minutes round trip, maybe 25 with traffic. "His next dose isn't for 2 hours. Please just hold him and keep him comfortable." "Of course," she smiled, reaching for my baby. "We'll be just fine, won't we, precious boy?" The drive to Hazel's school felt wrong. My hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, and I found myself speeding, desperate to get back home. When Hazel climbed into the car, she immediately asked, "Is Felix okay? He was really hot this morning." "He has a fever, but we're taking care of it," I assured her, though the words felt hollow. When we walked through the front door, the house was eerily quiet. We found Beatrice in the living room, Felix sleeping in her arms. He looked peaceful, his breathing even, and for a moment, relief washed over me. "See?" Beatrice cooed. "Grandma knows best. He just needed some natural healing." I took Felix from her arms, and something felt different. His skin was still warm but not burning like before. "What did you do?" "I used some cooling techniques my mother taught me," she said vaguely. "Traditional methods that actually work, unlike pumping babies full of drugs." The afternoon passed in a blur of temperature checks and worried observation. Felix seemed calmer, but something was off. His pupils looked strange, slightly dilated, and his usual evening fussiness was replaced by an unusual lethargy. When Grant came home at 6, I was pacing the living room with Felix in my arms. "His temperature was better, but now it's climbing again," I explained rapidly. "And he's acting strange, not like himself." Grant set down his briefcase with exaggerated patience. "Nadine, babies get fevers. It's normal." "This isn't normal." My voice cracked with frustration. "Look at him, Grant." "Really, look at your son." But Grant was already looking at his mother, who shook her head sadly. "I tried to help this afternoon, even got his fever down, but she insists on catastrophizing everything." By 7 o'clock, the thermometer showed 104.2. Felix's breathing had become shallow and rapid, his tiny chest working too hard for each breath. His cry had transformed into a weak, kitten-like mewl that terrified me more than any scream could have. "We're going to the emergency room now," I announced, grabbing the diaper bag with shaking hands. Grant rolled his eyes, the gesture so dismissive it felt like a slap. "You're overreacting again. This is exactly what the therapist talked about, your tendency to spiral into worst-case scenarios." I'd stopped seeing that therapist months ago when I realized Grant had been feeding her selective information, painting me as an anxious mother while omitting his mother's constant undermining. "Mom, tell her she's overreacting," Grant appealed to Beatrice. She smirked, that cruel little expression I'd come to hate. New mothers do tend to panic over every little thing. When Grant was a baby, I never ran to the emergency room for a simple fever. "His temperature is 104, I shouted, my composure finally shattering. "This isn't panic. This is appropriate medical concern. Because you keep pumping him with those medicines," Beatrice retorted, her mask slipping to reveal the venom beneath. "They cause reactions, you know. I gave him something natural this afternoon to counteract all those toxins you've been feeding him." The room went silent except for Felix's labored breathing. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. "You gave him something? What did you give him?" "Just some herbal mixture, completely harmless. My grandmother's recipe." She waved her hand dismissively, but there was something triumphant in her eyes. The pediatric emergency ward at Minneapolis Children's Hospital was a harsh contrast of fluorescent brightness and deep shadows, filled with the sounds of crying children and worried parents. I burst through the automatic doors carrying Felix, whose body now felt like a small furnace against my chest. Hazel stayed close to my side, clutching Dr. Brown so tightly her knuckles were white. Grant followed behind us, his phone still in his hand, texting furiously with what I knew were complaints to his mother about my dramatic overreaction. The triage nurse took one look at Felix and immediately called for a doctor. Within minutes, we were in an examination room where Dr. Brown, yes, that was really his name, a cosmic coincidence that made Hazel grip her teddy bear even tighter, began his assessment. He was younger than my father had been, maybe early 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and hands that moved with practiced efficiency. "How long has he had this fever?" Dr. Brown asked, placing his stethoscope on Felix's tiny chest. "Since this morning, but it spiked about an hour ago to 104.2, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "I gave him infant Tylenol at 9 this morning and again at 1:30 exactly as prescribed." The doctor nodded, then his expression shifted to concern as he examined Felix's pupils with a penlight. "Has he had any other medications today? Anything at all?" This was the moment everything pivoted. My mother-in-law gave him some herbal mixture this afternoon while I was picking up my daughter from school. Grant, who had been sulking by the door, suddenly interjected, "It was harmless." "My mother knows what she's doing. She raised 3 children. My wife is just overly anxious about everything." Dr. Brown's professional demeanor remained intact, but I saw his jaw tighten. He turned to Grant with a measured look that could have frozen fire. "Sir, mixing herbal remedies with prescription medications in infants can cause serious reactions. Some herbs interact dangerously with acetaminophen. We need to know exactly what was given." "I don't know what was in it," I admitted, my voice breaking. "She won't tell me the ingredients. She just said it was her grandmother's recipe." The doctor immediately ordered blood work and a toxicology screen. "We need to identify what's in his system. Nurse Martinez, please expedite these labs." He turned. Back to us, his expression grave. "Some traditional remedies contain substances that are toxic to infants. Honey, for instance, can cause botulism in babies under 1 year. Certain herbs can affect heart rate, breathing, and neurological function." Grant's face had gone pale, but his defensiveness remained. "You're all overreacting. My mother would never harm Felix." "Intent and outcome are different things, Mr. Porter," Dr. Brown said firmly. "Right now, our priority is stabilizing your son." They started an IV in Felix's tiny arm, the sight of it making my knees weak. A nurse brought me a chair, and I sat holding my baby's hand while they worked. Hazel stood beside me, unusually quiet, whispering something to her teddy bear that I couldn't quite hear. An hour passed in a blur of medical terminology and procedures. Felix's breathing was being monitored constantly, oxygen levels checked every few minutes. The blood work came back showing abnormal liver enzymes and signs of multiple substance interaction. Dr. Brown's expression grew increasingly serious as he reviewed the results. "Mrs. Porter, we need to admit Felix immediately. His blood work shows concerning levels that require close monitoring. We're seeing indicators of potential toxicity, though we can't identify the specific substances without knowing what herbs were used. Grant exploded, his voice echoing off the sterile walls. "This is ridiculous. You're all overreacting. My mother used natural remedies on all of us, and we're fine." "Your son is not fine, Mr. Porter," Dr. Brown responded sharply. "He's showing signs of respiratory distress and possible neurological impact. We need to act quickly." The waiting room they moved us to felt like a cage. Grant sat in the corner, texting furiously with his mother, occasionally glaring at me as if this was somehow my fault. I held Felix, who was now connected to monitors that beeped with terrifying regularity, each sound a reminder of how wrong everything had gone. Hazel sat on the chair beside me, Dr. Brown the teddy bear in her lap, her small face etched with an expression too serious for a 7-year-old. A pediatric specialist arrived to consult, then another. Conversations happened in hushed tones just outside our room. Words like potential poisoning and child protective services drifted through the doorway. Grant heard them too, and his anger transformed into something closer to fear. "This is insane," he muttered, but his voice had lost its earlier conviction. Mom was just trying to help. I looked at him then, really looked at the man I'd married 8 years ago. The man who'd cried when Hazel was born, who'd stayed up all night with me when Felix had colic at 2 months old. That man was gone, replaced by someone who valued his mother's approval over his children's safety. "Grant," I said quietly, "our baby is in the hospital. Your mother gave him an unknown substance that's causing a medical emergency. How is this helping?" Before he could answer, Hazel stood up, walked to the middle of the room, and spoke in a clear, determined voice that commanded everyone's attention. "Dr. Brown," Hazel said, standing in the center of that sterile hospital room with her teddy bear pressed against her chest, "should I tell you what Grandma gave the baby instead of his real medicine?" The pediatric ward went ice cold. Every head turned to my 7-year-old daughter. The monitors beeping Felix's vital signs seemed to grow louder in the sudden silence. A nurse who'd been adjusting Felix's IV froze mid-motion. Grant's phone slipped from his hand, clattering on the linoleum floor. Dr. Brown immediately knelt to Hazel's level, his voice gentle but urgent. "What do you mean, sweetheart? This is very important." Hazel took a deep breath, and I saw her gather courage the way she did before jumping off the high dive at the community pool last summer. I saw Grandma pour out Felix's white medicine in the bathroom sink, the real medicine Mommy gives him. Then she filled the bottle with her brown liquid from a jar she keeps hidden in her suitcase. She said it was our secret game. My legs gave out. I sank into the nearest chair, still clutching Felix, while the room erupted into controlled chaos. Dr. Brown stood quickly, calling for security and additional staff. Grant's face had gone from pale to gray, his mouth opening and closing without sound. "Hazel," Dr. Brown continued, maintaining his gentle tone despite the urgency, "when did you see this happen?" 2 weeks ago, Hazel said, her small voice steady, the day after Grandma moved in. "She told me if I told anyone, Mommy and Daddy would get divorced and it would be my fault. She said I'd have to choose who to live with and the other parent would hate me forever. But Felix is really sick. And my real Dr. Brown, my Teddy, he was named after my grandpa who was a doctor, and Mommy always says doctors help people tell the truth when someone is sick." 2 weeks. My baby had been receiving unknown substances instead of his prescribed medications for 2 weeks. Every dose I'd carefully measured and given him, thinking I was helping him with teething pain, with minor fevers, with the normal discomforts of infancy, had been Beatrice's concoction. "She's been doing it every day," Hazel continued, tears now streaming down her face. "Sometimes twice a day. She'd wait until Mommy went to the bathroom or was doing laundry, and she'd switch them really fast. She had different jars for different medicines, brown liquid for the fever medicine, green stuff for the teething gel, and something clear for the gas drops." Dr. Brown immediately grabbed the room phone, his voice sharp and professional. "I need poison control on the line immediately, and get security to the patient's residence right now. We need all substances from the grandmother's room tested." He turned to me. "Mrs. Porter, do you have power of attorney for medical decisions?" Yes, I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. No, wait. Grant finally found his voice, stepping forward. This is some kind of misunderstanding. Hazel's confused. Kids make things up. She's not making it up, Hazel shouted, stunning everyone with her vehemence. I took pictures with Mommy's old phone, the one you let me play games on. She pulled my old iPhone from her pocket, the one we'd given her for educational apps. I knew it was bad, but Grandma scared me. So I took pictures in case Felix got sick. The room went silent again as Hazel opened the photo app with the password I'd taught her. There they were, blurry but unmistakable photos of Beatrice pouring out medicine, filling bottles from mason jars, even one of her threatening gesture toward Hazel with her finger to her lips. My God, Grant breathed, staggering backward until he hit the wall. Within the hour, police arrived at our house with Beatrice, who'd been forced to surrender her suitcase and its contents. She entered the hospital emergency room in handcuffs, her perfect grandmother facade completely shattered. The mason jars were tested immediately by the hospital lab. I was helping, Beatrice shrieked as officers questioned her, her voice echoing through the emergency ward. Those medicines are poison. I was saving him. Natural remedies are better. The test results came back within hours, thanks to the emergency protocol. The brown liquid contained belladonna, honey, and crushed herbs, including foxglove, all potentially fatal to infants. The green substance had peppermint oil concentrated enough to cause breathing problems in babies. The clear liquid was essentially grain alcohol mixed with chamomile. Your daughter saved your son's life, Dr. Brown told me quietly as they prepared to move Felix to the pediatric intensive care unit. Another day or two of these substances, especially the belladonna and foxglove combination, could have caused organ failure. Grant stood in the corner, watching his mother being read her rights, his world collapsing around him. "Mom," he said, his voice broken, "how could you?" Beatrice's response chilled everyone in earshot. "I did it for you. She's not good enough for you. She's weak, anxious, a terrible mother. I was proving it. If the baby had gotten sicker, you'd have seen how incompetent she is. Then you could have divorced her and found someone worthy of our family name." The calculated cruelty of it, the premeditated nature of slowly poisoning an infant to destroy his mother's credibility, left everyone in that emergency room stunned. This wasn't misguided help or ignorant use of folk remedies. This was attempted murder disguised as grandmother's wisdom. Felix spent 3 days in the pediatric intensive care unit, hooked to monitors that tracked every heartbeat, every breath, every sign that his small body was fighting off the poisons his grandmother had fed him. I never left his side, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair beside his crib, waking every time a nurse came to check his vitals. The belladonna had affected his nervous system, causing the dilated pupils and respiratory issues. The foxglove had stressed his tiny heart. The honey posed a botulism risk that required careful monitoring. But he was a fighter, my little warrior, and slowly, steadily, he improved. Hazel stayed with my sister during those first critical days, but I called her every morning and night. "You're the bravest girl in the world," I told her during one call. "You saved your brother's life." "I should have told sooner," she whispered back, and I could hear the weight of guilt no 7-year-old should carry. "Listen to me, sweetheart. Grandma was an adult who made you afraid. You told the truth when it mattered most. That takes incredible courage." Beatrice was charged with attempted murder, child endangerment, poisoning, and witness intimidation of a minor. Her lawyer tried to argue diminished capacity, claiming she believed she was helping, but the prosecutors had Hazel's photos, showing the deliberate bottle switching, and more damning, they had Beatrice's own journals found in her suitcase. Pages and pages detailing her plan to prove I was an unfit mother, to break up my marriage, to get custody of the children for her son. The calculated cruelty of it was laid bare in her own handwriting. She eventually pleaded guilty to lesser charges to avoid trial, receiving 5 years in prison with mandatory psychological evaluation. The judge, a grandmother herself, told Beatrice at sentencing, "You betrayed the most sacred trust that exists, the trust of a child in their grandmother's love. You used your grandson as a weapon against his mother. This court has rarely seen such calculated cruelty disguised as care." Grant moved out the day Felix was released from the hospital. He couldn't look at any of us, the shame and guilt eating him alive. During our divorce proceedings 6 months later, his lawyer half-heartedly tried to claim I was an anxious parent, but the hospital records, police reports, and Hazel's brave testimony painted the real picture. Grant had enabled his mother's abuse through willful blindness, choosing her approval over his children's safety. "I'm sorry," he said after signing the divorce papers. "I should have listened to you. I should have protected them." "Yes," I replied simply, "you should have." He sends money regularly, more than required by the court order. He sends letters to the children that I let them read when they're ready. But rebuilding trust with them will take years, if it happens at all. Hazel told her therapist she's afraid of him now, afraid he'll choose someone else over her again. That's his burden to carry. Our house feels different now, lighter, safer. I redecorated the guest room, turning it into an art studio for Hazel. She paints pictures of our family of 3, always including Dr. Brown the teddy bear, sometimes adding a faint outline of her grandfather watching over us. Felix, now 14 months old, is thriving. He walks on sturdy legs, says mama and hey hey for his sister, and his laugh fills our home with joy instead of fear. The pediatrician who saved Felix's life, Dr. Brown, became a friend. He testified at Beatrice's sentencing about the severity of what could have happened. He also wrote a letter to the medical board about the importance of believing mothers when they say something is wrong with their children. Maternal instinct, he wrote, is often dismissed as anxiety. In this case, a mother's anxiety was the only thing standing between her child and a potential tragedy. I don't question myself anymore. When that inner voice speaks, I listen. I've learned that what others labeled as anxiety was actually intuition screaming warnings. I've learned that keeping the peace isn't worth risking your children's safety. I've learned that family isn't about blood, but about who shows up to protect the vulnerable. Hazel keeps Dr. Brown the teddy on a shelf in her room now, saying she's getting too old to carry him everywhere. But sometimes, when she thinks I'm not looking, I see her take him down and whisper to him. I think she's telling him about her day, about Felix's new words, about how we're okay now. I think she's telling her grandfather's memory that she kept her promise to protect her brother. One evening, as I tucked both children into bed, Hazel asked me, "Mom, are you still sad about Dad and Grandma?" I thought carefully before answering. I'm sad they made choices that hurt our family, but I'm not sad about where we are now. We're safe, we're healthy, and we have each other. Felix reached up from his crib, babbling happily, and Hazel smiled. "We're good, aren't we, Mom?" "Yes, baby," I said, kissing them both goodnight. "We're good." The story I've shared with you isn't just about survival. It's about the power of truth, the courage of children, and the strength of a mother's instinct. It's about recognizing that the most dangerous threats often come wrapped in familiarity and false concern. If my story helps even one parent trust their instincts, one child find the courage to speak up, or one family recognize the warning signs of manipulation disguised as love, then sharing this pain has purpose. If this story resonated with you, please share it with others who might need to hear it. Like this video if it touched your heart or opened your eyes. Comment below with your own experiences of trusting your instincts when everyone told you that you were wrong. And please subscribe to this channel for more real stories of survival, courage, and triumph over those who would harm the innocent. Together, we can create a community where mothers are believed, children are protected, and family means safety, not sabotage. Remember, you're not anxious. You're aware. You're not overreacting. You're protecting. Trust yourself. Your children are counting on it.